I'm Ian McDonald from Myall. I first saw the light in November the 3rd, 1913. I have never grown very tall because of the drought year, like my 5 brothers who are all taller than me. But anyway, I grew up and I'm in this photograph that you've seen, a baby in arms in the bed of the Murray. The occasion when this photograph was taken was during the drought of 1914, New Year's Day 1914. At the time I was a baby in arms in that vehicle, second from the back. The Murray at that time was bone dry in that situation, and numerous times since we have carted firewood for the stoking of steam engines through the river just on that spot. I don't remember too much about it, of course, because I was too young, but I've seen a lot of droughts since, and I believe that the mid-1940s was a more severe drought than we have now, only that it wasn't so prolonged. The drought of 1942 to 45 was a very, very bad dry time, and we had, the country was plagued with rabbits at that stage, and dust blew up and the blackout dust storms occurred at fairly regular intervals, and so we really got it doing. And we had the war in our hands at the same time. And it was very hard on the women because no matter how well they kept house, they still had to sweep and shovel dust out of the house. Covered railway lines and filled up channels and all sorts of things. Fences, a lot of fences were just completely buried up in the mallee. Livestock, of course, they suffered everywhere. And if it hadn't been for the dams, the river would have been dry 3 times in my lifetime. I'm quite sure of that. We're thankful for the water that we've got there now in the Murray. Yeah, well, my wife here, she stuck with me through the drought. she could have disappeared in the dust storm, you know, but she stuck with me, and we weathered the drought all right. And then we had 20 good years after that. So, and that was typical of what happened. Yeah, well, it just points up the fact that if it hadn't been for the dams, you know, the whole show would have been high and dry now, South Australia, Victoria, New South and all. The condition of the Darling at the present time is a good example of that. Darling has run dry already, and the same thing would be happening to the Murray now if it hadn't been for the foresight of the builders of the past in the Snowy scheme and the Hume Dam. Because I wasn't on the scene during the 1902-03 drought, but I'm told that it was a very, very severe drought, and people, they suffered all sorts of hardships because there was no irrigation in this area at that time. But I have an interesting, I came across an interesting story about the 14 drought. My wife's grandfather, Lake Kangaroo, found that the lake went dry and he couldn't get his cattle a drink without taking them 6 miles each day over to Lake Charm for water. So that's the sort of thing that happened in those days. So, you know, we think we're badly off now, but by and large people are well off and the country's much more prosperous. And I think we should be able to weather this drought if we use our brains a bit. We should be able to get through this drought okay. I remember that downstream about half a mile from this site there was a deep hole in the river, and that an old gentleman called Vestorini, Ackless Vestorini, and other citizens as well, they took steam engine pumps down into the bed of the river to pump water out of this hole to keep some water flowing down the channel system to Murrabit. So I guess that sort of thing happened up and down the river to some extent. They just used whatever water they could that was in the holes in the river. Here you have my grandparents on my mother's side, Albert Hall's large buggy with his family, an old pioneer, Jack Watson, the Lake family from Myall, Dawson's nursery cart or dog cart as we called it, Wilson family from Myall, and our own family buggy at the second from the right. I was a small child wrapped in a shawl at that stage, and I can remember the horse's name was Queenie because we drove her to school for many years after that. I don't know the name of the dog.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about the scope of the current drought. Some have claimed it's the worst drought in a millennium. Well, today, some revealing pictures about the drought of 1914-1915. Here's a photograph taken on New Year's Day 1914 near a place called Koondrook on the Murray River. Now, this is the actual bed of the river, and you can see the drought at the time was so bad the mighty Murray had actually stopped flowing. Now, here's the same location just a couple of weeks ago, obviously plenty of water. And here's another photo, circa 1915, a couple of families having a picnic in the bed of the bay. Once again, circa 1914, 1915, the Murray River. At least here we can see a small puddle. And here it is today. Despite the drought, despite the irrigators, despite the snowy scheme, plenty of water. Or at least plenty of water compared to the drought of 90 years ago.